Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
Thank you very much. Bonjour. Yesterday we heard the Trhone Speech, and I outlined how the Trhone Speech talked a lot about real action, but was in fact just real empty. And there's a reason for that. And the reason why I'm concerned is because there's an urgency around some of the crises that Canadians are facing right now. They need help urgently. And it's clear that the Liberal government is not responding to that urgency. They are choosing not to respond to that urgency. We know that the housing crisis is a crisis. That is a concern that I hear everywhere I go from anyone that I speak to. People cannot find a home that's in their budget. Parents who have housing are worried about their kids. People who have good jobs are worried. People who are struggling and don't have good employment are worried. And people who have no income are unable to find housing that's available for them. So this is a serious crisis, and we're not seeing the urgency to respond to this to the level that we need. And that's a problem. And we're not seeing specifically, and something that's really missing, is a plan for Indigenous housing, something we know is a specific concern. So that's a troubling sign that they're not responding, that the Liberals and Justin Trudeau are not responding to the urgency that people are faced with. The climate crisis, we are faced with the impacts of it right now. We are now seeing another potential atmospheric river that's going to hit BC, and we already are reeling from the impact of the last heavy rainfall and flooding that has been disastrous. Given the extreme weather, given the climate crisis, we expected that same level of urgency to be reflected in the Trhone Speech, and it's not. And one of the most important things that COP26 spoke about, and it was agreed upon, is that we need to end fossil fuel subsidies. And that is completely absent from the Trhone Speech. And while the Liberals have talked about it, they've talked about it in the past as well. They've talked about it and never done it. In fact, they've increased those subsidies. So it's another thing that I'm particularly concerned about, the urgency to respond to the climate crisis, ending those fossil fuel subsidies, and using that public funding to incentivize renewable energy, to support workers, to have a clear plan for workers, a real just transition. These are things that we need to focus on. And we need to make sure that communities are resilient, so they have the supports they need so they can respond to the extreme weather by investing in infrastructure that helps them prevent some of the disasters that we've seen by being more prepared for extreme weather, whether it's forest fires or flooding. And those are some of the things that we want to see this government focus on. Immediate things, paid sick leave is something we agree with. But we've got to point out that we talked about this 22 times over the past 18 months, and we've said to the Liberals, this is something that could have saved lives. There is no reason to delay now, but it is still very disappointing that it took them this long to get to this point. We knew that this is something important, and they're only now promising it. But this will be a victory that we fought for and obtained for Canadians if it gets passed, with something we want to see happen immediately. Donc aujourd'hui, je veux encore répéter comment ce qu'on a vu hier avec le discours du trône, c'était effectivement vide pour répondre aux besoins des gens avec l'urgence qu'on a besoin. On parle de la crise climatique et le fait que la Colombie-Britannique a été frappée fort par la crise climatique et le fait que les actions nécessaires ne sont pas dans le discours de Trhone. L'urgence pour répondre à cette crise n'est pas là. On veut voir un engagement pour éliminer les subventions aux entreprises pétrolières. Ce n'est pas là. Et on a besoin des actions concrètes pour aider les municipalités d'être plus préparées pour la température extrême. On sait aussi que la crise du logement frappe fort. C'est tellement difficile de trouver un logement abordable. On doit avoir des actions aussi urgentes pour faire face à cette crise. Et dans le discours de Trhone, cette urgence n'était pas là. Et finalement, on a plein de choses, plusieurs choses sur lesquelles on peut travailler tout de suite. Un, par exemple, c'est une congé de maladie payée. C'est quelque chose qu'on a demandé depuis longtemps, depuis 18 mois. On a demandé directement au gouvernement, au Justin Trudeau, 22 fois, d'avoir un tel programme, d'augmenter l'accès à ce programme. Il a dit non 22 fois. Maintenant, il accepte que c'est important. On veut que ce projet de loi passe vite, rapidement. Donc, on est toujours là pour travailler ensemble, mais je veux encore réajouter que notre but, c'est de s'assurer que ce gouvernement fonctionne pour les gens. Et ça, c'est notre but. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. With that, I'm ready for any questions you might have.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Mr. Singh, you said yesterday you were uncertain about whether your party would support the Trhone speech when it came up to a vote in the House Commons, confidence vote, as you know, and if the government lost that vote, we'd be into an election campaign. Having met with your caucus now, do you have any clarity now on that position? Do you know with more certainty whether you will or will not support the Trhone speech in the House?
The Trhone speech, we said really clearly, does not respond to the urgency that Canadians are faced with. And one of the things that we were looking for to see, is this a Trhone speech that shows us that there's a willingness to work together? After speaking with caucus, caucus agrees very clearly that this is not a Trhone speech that indicates a willingness to work together with us. This is a Trhone speech that does not respond to the urgency that Canadians are faced with. There may or may not be a vote on this, and we will let you know as soon as it comes clear when that vote is, the way we'll vote. But I wanted to be clear to the Liberals that they should not take our support for granted, and that this speech, as it's been presented, does not present to us a desire to work together in the interest of Canadians.
You noted yesterday that there was no mention in the Trhone speech of pharmacare. There's barely a mention of it from Mr. Trudeau's side during the election campaign. Do you believe this is no longer something the government is going to act on? And if so, does that change your willingness to support the government, not necessarily on the Trhone speech, but in other future votes?
Well, for any vote, the Liberals should not again count on our support. We will look at each vote and make a decision based on if it's going to benefit Canadians or not. The Liberals have already shown a willingness to go to the Conservatives or to the Bloc if they want to pass something that hurts Canadians. And they know that we are going to be there. If it's a support that will help people out, that will make things better, we're always available for that. So I think that should be clear for any vote. The Liberals shouldn't expect us to support their bills, any of them. It'll only be the case that we support if there's a benefit to Canadians. And in terms of pharmacare, it's something that I mentioned and given it as an example on the campaign trail, and I give it as an example again of the Liberals saying one thing and then doing something completely opposite. And this is a really stark example because it wasn't that long ago, 2 years ago in 2019, they campaigned on it. They campaigned on bringing in pharmacare. And then in their Trhone speech after the election, they included that in specifically that we will work towards pharmacare. And the complete absence of pharmacare now, the fact that the Prime Minister is unwilling to even say the words, make it clear that this is just another example of the Liberals saying one thing and doing another. And that has been the problem. And that's why we have always said we're worried about their actions. They sometimes say the right things and then often don't do them. In this case, with the Trhone speech, they haven't even said the right things, let alone do the right things. So it certainly is a problem, and it is another example of why we are uncertain if the Liberals want to work in the benefit of Canadians, because that's something that we put out very clearly as a priority for us, and now they've not even mentioned the word. They themselves mentioned it as a priority for them, and the fact that they've abandoned it should also give Canadians pause about whether they're serious about doing the things that they say they want to do.
Catherine Lévesque, La Presse canadienne. Bonjour, Monsieur Singh.
Bonjour.
Donc, juste sur le discours du trône, si je comprends bien que vous n'avez pas encore pris de décision là, en caucus sur si vous allez l'appuyer ou non, c'est ça?
À ce moment, on n'a pas dit aux gens si on va voter oui ou non, mais on veut encore répéter deux choses. Un, les libéraux ne peuvent pas prendre pour acquis notre appui pour aucun vote. Ce n'est pas quelque chose qu'ils peuvent prendre pour acquis. On va décider à chaque vote comment on va voter. Comme pour chaque projet de loi ou chaque vote, on va faire cette décision quand on a une décision devant nous. Et deuxièmement, ce que le discours de Trhone a montré à nous, c'est que le gouvernement libéral ne veut pas travailler avec nous parce qu'ils ont complètement manqué d'ajouter des éléments importants pour les gens, comme des actions concrètes pour faire face à la crise du logement pour la communauté autochtone, ou des actions concrètes pour faire face à la crise climatique, incluant une annulation, un arrêt des subventions pétrolières.
Okay, donc, juste pour clarifier là-dessus, est-ce que vous avez pris votre décision, mais vous ne voulez pas l'annoncer ou la décision n'a pas été prise? Juste un oui ou non.
On va vous donner la décision quand la date arrive.
OK. Ma deuxième question, c'était justement sur, en fait, les exemptions de vaccination des conservateurs. Bon, je sais qu'on en parle beaucoup, mais je voulais quand même savoir quelle était la position du NPD là-dessus. Est-ce que vous pensez que les conservateurs devraient dire combien il y a d'exemptions médicales? Est-ce que vous pensez qu'ils devraient faire preuve de plus de transparence là-dessus ou vous n'en avez pas?
Oui, on pense que le Parti conservateur doit montrer plus de transparence, bien sûr, mais au-delà de ça, on pense que le Parti conservateur doit réfléchir pour un moment, c'est quoi leur but, c'est quoi leur raison d'être, parce qu'ils sont à ce moment l'opposition officielle du Canada. Et depuis des semaines, quand les gens ont fait face des défis dans leur vie, quand on est dans une pandémie, avec plein des enjeux, la seule chose qui soulève du Parti conservateur, c'est le fait qu'il veut avoir une exemption, il veut avoir des permissions spéciales et il pense qu'ils sont des élus et les règles n'appliquent pas à eux. C'est une mauvaise message envoyé aux gens et c'est un exemple que ce parti n'a pas des priorités qui sont liées aux priorités des gens. Ils ont montré une faille de leadership et ils doivent réfléchir sur ce qu'est le point d'avoir un parti comme ça dans une crise comme ça s'ils ne peuvent pas avoir un accord sur quelque chose assez simple comme le fait de protéger les gens qui travaillent dans le même milieu de travail. Oh, it's a bit long-winded, so I got to think of that. Yeah, I'll try to. Yes, of course, I believe that the Conservatives should be more transparent about what's going on in their caucus and about their vaccination status. They need more transparency for sure. But really what I would want to send my message to the Conservative Party is they are the official opposition of Canada. In a time of crisis, in a time of struggle, when people are still facing a pandemic, when we're really uncertain about the future, the cost of living is going up, things are hard right now. And the fact that the only thing that we hear coming out of the Conservative Party for the past number of weeks is the fact that they want special treatment, they want exemptions, they don't agree about getting vaccinated is really a failure of leadership. They're completely missing the priorities of Canadians. They are completely out to lunch when it comes to what Canadians are going through. Canadians don't want to hear the official party of Canada talking about getting special permission for their members of parliament. Canadians want to see solutions to the housing crisis. They want to see solutions to the climate crisis. BC is underwater. They want to see real fixes to the problems that people are faced with. And the official opposition of Canada right now is focused on getting special permission for their MPs. That is completely disconnected from the realities that Canadians are faced with.
Bonjour, Juliane Lapointe de Radio-Canada.
Bonjour.
Monsieur Singh, peut-être nous dire, cette semaine, est-ce que vous vous êtes vous-même personnellement senti à l'aise dans la Chambre des communes? Qu'est-ce que ça prendrait à plus court terme là, pour qu'il y ait un sentiment de sécurité partagé?
En général, je sais que la plupart des gens reconnaissent l'importance d'être vacciné. Donc, ça me donne de confiance. Personnellement, je suis plus inquiété pour les gens qui travaillent
dans le Parlement, les gens qui travaillent sur la colline. Et je veux qu'on fasse le travail nécessaire pour créer un milieu sécuritaire pour tout le monde et qu'on suive les conseils des santé publique. Et ça, c'est mon but. Et à ce moment, pour la plupart des gens ici, je pense qu'il y a un consensus. Les gens sont d'accord qu'on doit prendre les mesures nécessaires et ça me donne de confiance.
Maintenant, vous nous convoquez ici pour dire que vous êtes déçu du discours du trône, que vous trouvez que c'est un discours qui est vide, mais vous n'êtes pas prêt à mettre le mot pour dire que vous êtes contre, que vous allez voter contre le discours. Pourquoi vous gardez cette porte ouverte-là en ce moment? Est-ce que vous êtes en train de tendre une main aux libéraux, justement?
Je veux montrer, et c'est important, c'est une question importante parce que je veux montrer ce que j'ai toujours dit, ma volonté de travailler ensemble et ma désir de faire fonctionner ce gouvernement. Et ce qu'on a vu depuis longtemps, c'est vraiment un grand problème du Parti libéral et du gouvernement libéral. C'est le fait que, comme on dit, les patines ne suivent pas les babines. Le fait que les bottines ne suivent pas les babines. Le fait qu'il dit souvent les belles mots, mais il ne les suit pas. Et les actions ne sont pas là. C'est vraiment quelque chose que j'ai entendu des gens souvent quand je voyage à travers les pays. Et c'est dommage parce que ça a un impact. Quand le gouvernement libéral a promis de faire quelque chose et ne le fait pas, ça blesse les gens. Ça nuit les efforts d'améliorer la société. Donc, c'est un problème. Ça, c'est pourquoi je soulève ce problème. Et dans ce discours de Trhone, ce n'est pas seulement un problème des belles paroles, mais sans des actions concrètes. Ils ont aussi manqué d'avoir des paroles nécessaires pour montrer une vision pour régler les problèmes dans le pays à ce moment. Donc, mais je veux toujours montrer que mon but, c'est de faire fonctionner ce gouvernement, de forcer ce gouvernement de livrer les marchandises pour les gens. Et je suis toujours ouvert à trouver des solutions, à trouver des façons de forcer ce gouvernement de faire ce qu'il faut. Donc, ça, c'est pourquoi je veux toujours garder les portes ouvertes pour trouver des solutions.
Alex Ballingal, Toronto Star. I just saw this morning on the notice paper, your party had put up a bunch of private members' bills and motions that you want to propose. And one of them was to call for the cancellation of construction of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. I know you were asked about that. We asked you a bunch of times during the election, and you'd said you wanted to wait and see if you guys won the election. You'd look at the situation and make a decision once you had all the details and power. So I'm wondering, has the position changed of your party? Are you now willing to say you have enough information, you call for the cancellation, or has your position changed, and what exactly is it?
Well, our position has never changed in the sense that we've always been opposed to the project. We think that it was a wrong decision. The government shouldn't have purchased it, and it was a wrong decision to move ahead with it. And we'll look at any assets in terms of the government and what makes the best sense in terms of how we move forward. But our position has never changed. We think it's a wrong decision to purchase it, wrong decision to move forward with it. And we'll continue to talk about how we can create a good plan for workers and how we can continue to present real options for a just transition that includes a clear vision for where workers will have good jobs and a good future. That's really our priority, and that's where we want to see funds spent.
I just want to make sure I understand. Are you saying that the motion put forward by Peter Julian to call for the cancellation of the pipeline, that's not the party policy, or that is now the party policy, to cancel construction of the expansion?
My position hasn't changed on this. I've always been opposed to the project, and I've said once in government we would assess and make the decision about what to do with the asset.
Okay.
Bonjour, M. Singh, Boris Proulx du Devoir. Est-ce que vous allez appuyer la motion 1 concernant le Parlement hybride, ce qui a été proposé là?
Oui, on est pour cette motion, on est pour un Parlement hybride. On pense que ça donne un outil nécessaire pour la sécurité, la santé et aussi la flexibilité pour les députés.
Et je voudrais revenir sur le projet de loi attendu par le gouvernement concernant les aides financières pour la pandémie. On attend ça très bientôt. Qu'est-ce qui ferait en sorte que vous... j'ai compris que vous appuyez pas nécessairement le projet libéral qui va être présenté. J'aimerais savoir qu'est-ce que vous voudriez voir là-dedans pour l'appuyer. Et si jamais le Bloc était tenté de l'appuyer, là, est-ce que ça vous ferait pas perdre un petit peu votre levier d'action sur le gouvernement?
J'ai manqué le début de votre question. C'est quoi le projet de loi? Quel projet de loi de vous parlez?
On s'attend à ce qu'il y ait un projet de loi sur tout ce qui est aide financière pour la pandémie.
Pour la pandémie, OK.
Ouais.
Oui. Donc, ce qu'on a noté comme problème avec ce qui est proposé par le gouvernement libéral, c'est un projet de loi qui va couper l'aide aux gens. Et sans avoir une alternative, c'est un projet de loi qui, on est contre ce projet de loi parce que ça va couper l'aide aux gens sans avoir une amélioration de l'assurance emploi parce qu'à ce moment, l'assurance emploi, comme vous savez, ne couvre pas 60% des gens. Donc, ça veut dire que la majorité des gens qui travaillent au Canada ne sont pas couverts par l'assurance emploi. Donc, c'est un projet de loi qui va blesser les gens, qui va laisser de côté les gens qui ne peuvent pas retourner au travail. Donc, c'est un projet de loi on va voter contre. Et si le gouvernement est prêt de donner une alternative, de s'assurer qu'il règle les autres problèmes comme des réductions d'aide pour les gens qui reçoivent l'aide financière, nos aînés et les gens qui reçoivent le bénéfice canadien pour les enfants. Donc, s'il règle ces problèmes qui existent à ce moment, on est ouvert de trouver des autres solutions. Mais à ce moment, sans avoir une alternative, on est contre ce projet de loi parce que ça va faire mal aux gens, ça va blesser les gens. Et les autres partis, si le gouvernement libéral veut trouver une allié avec les Blocs ou les conservateurs pour couper l'aide aux gens, c'est à eux de décider et c'était eux d'expliquer pourquoi ils vont couper l'aide aux gens quand ils ont besoin d'aide.
Operator, do we have a question on the phone?
Thank you. The next question, la prochaine question est de Mary Brooke from Island Social Trends. Please go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Singh.
Hi there.
Hi. Later today, you're going to be speaking with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and I'm just wondering what approach the NDP will be taking with housing with them, because usually it's zoning that needs to be changed at the municipal level in order to facilitate more housing. I presume you've mentioned that to them before, so will there be a difference this time?
Thank you very much. With FCM, we're going to have two focuses. One, of course, on housing and how the federal government can be a better partner to deliver funds for building more housing. What I've heard from a lot of municipalities is that there are these funds set up, but they're not accessible. They can't actually get access to the funds. And there's many mayors from municipalities that say, we're ready. We have projects, we are ready, we've got the know-how, we want to build more homes, but we just don't have access to the funds necessary to build those homes. So that's one thing that we're gonna push for change on. More money and more accessible funds, more accessible money so that not just provinces but that municipalities can access them to build more homes. We know that the housing crisis is going to require building more homes, and as well as looking at some of the pressures that are driving up the cost of housing. So a supply side concern as well as speculative forces driving up the cost of housing. We want to see solutions on both, and we think that municipalities are in a great position to deliver the solution, some of the solution on the supply side. And then the second piece that we want to really emphasize with the FCM is the need to invest directly, federal government's investment in building the infrastructure necessary for communities to be more resilient. So knowing that there's going to be increased flooding, having the bridges or the roads and the appropriate infrastructure for dealing with increased water flow and river flow so that there aren't the same impacts of flooding, as well as looking at infrastructure investments to prevent the impacts of forest fires. These are things that we need to build. That creates jobs, and it also helps build more resilient communities. So those are the two focuses that we'll have when we speak with the FCM later on today.
Thanks. And also, yesterday, the Liberals' priorities, their 4 priorities, didn't seem to leave a lot of room for addressing the GIS and child benefit clawbacks that you've been mentioning. So how will the NDP continue to push for that in this session?
Well, that's exactly it. We are deeply concerned that there's nothing to address those two problems. There is definitely an injustice that seniors who are amongst the most vulnerable, those that are on GIS, are experiencing clawbacks now because they needed help in the pandemic. These seniors are worse off now than they were before the pandemic, and it should not be this way. This is wrong. People that rely on the child benefit are seeing clawbacks as well. Again, this is wrong, and so we want to see fixes to that. These are Canadians they're going to be struggling now, that are struggling right now with these clawbacks. Many of them, we've heard stories from people in my caucus, from my MPs, stories of people that are going to lose their home because they don't have enough money to pay their rent because of the GIS clawback. They can't buy groceries because of the clawback. So these are people that need our help, and so far the Liberal government has not mentioned anything about it in the Trhone Speech, nor have they mentioned it in any of the bills they're proposing to fix this problem. So they have not proposed to fix this problem. So this is something that we're going to continue to push for.
Hi, yes, David Thurton, CBC News. I'm just seeing my newsroom. They might have some questions for you. Yes. So just checking my email, a little distracted here. I guess I'll ask you about what Conservative Leader Aaron O'Toole said this morning, that, he saw a lot of division. He saw Justin Trudeau dividing the country in that Trhone Speech. I'm paraphrasing here. Did you see anything in that Trhone Speech that was causing further division within the country?
No, our concern wasn't about the division created. It's the forgetting people and leaving people behind and not responding to the needs of people. So it is a Trhone Speech that doesn't respond to the urgency of the problems that people are faced with. The government's making a choice here not to respond to the housing crisis with the level of urgency that's required. There's a choice the government's making in this Trhone Speech not to respond to the climate crisis with, again, the urgency required. So it's really a Trhone Speech that doesn't respond to what people need and what they're going through, as opposed to dividing people.
And just finally, just on Conservative caucus, something that a lot of the reporters noticed is that there was a basket of rapid tests outside. I'm wondering what you think about that, and if you think, whether you're unvaccinated or vaccinated, whether if you're entering this house, if you're entering any of the buildings here, that you should be doing tests. That should be a regular thing, because of course we know people can transmit the virus if they're vaccinated, and certainly if you're not.
Yeah, rapid tests certainly are something that we use in the campaign. It's something people have used in different settings, so I can see an argument for it. I think when it comes to questions about what's the safest way for us to gather, we should always consult with the experts in this matter, public health folks, and listen to their guidance around what would be the best way for us to come together in the ways that we do. So I'm open always to hearing improvements or ways that we can improve to keep people safe and to keep our families safe as well.
Bonjour, M. Singh. Olivier Ferron-Boissier de TVA. Juste une petite question. Bon, on connaît votre position sur la loi 21, mais je me demandais ce que vous pensiez du fait que le ministère de l'Éducation de l'Ontario a financé des capsules dans lesquelles on cite comme un exemple évident d'islamophobie la loi 21 du Québec.
C'est clair que je suis contre ces projets de loi. C'est clair que je suis contre les lois qui discriminent les gens et les lois qui promouvoir une discrimination nuit à la société. Donc, c'est clair que 21, c'est une loi qui...
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.